In the year 2000, the Turkish multinational construction firm Gama came to Ireland. This followed a trade mission to Turkey in 1998 by Enterprise Ireland, the Irish State's Industry Development Agency, accompanied by the Taoiseach, Mary Harney. The Irish government had been the target of complaints about spiralling labour costs and major delays on key infrastructure projects, such as road building in Ireland. Gama Construction from Turkey were able to complete projects at a much lower cost than Irish companies, and even ahead of schedule. Gama were granted many major infrastructure projects such as the Ballincollig and Ennis bypasses, 2 ESB power stations, and other work for the local authorities in Dublin. By the start of 2005, Gama employed more than 1,300 people in Ireland, with around 1,000 of those coming directly from Turkey.
Gama'da 2002 yılına geldim ben burada. Türkiye'deki ekonomi durumları iyi olmadığı için Gama'da iş aramak için gitmiştim zaten. Oradan beni çağırdılar zaten Gama'da. Ben Türkiye'de zaten işsizdim yani. İş olmadığı için Gama'ya başvurdum. Gama'da direkt beni İrlanda'ya gönderdi.
Benim Gama'da çalışmamın sebebi Türkiye'deki ekonomi şartlarının bozuk oluşu ve bununla birlikte getirdiği işsizlik sorunları yüzünden benim Gama gibi şirketlerde çalışmama sebep oldu.
The business establishment in Ireland toasted Gama. Its Irish managing director, Hakan Kara Aliolu, became a leading member of the Dublin Chamber of Commerce, and the company was given awards by the National Standards Authority of Ireland. This, along with donations to the local community, helped Gama to cultivate a good public image. No one seemed too concerned about the reasons why Gama was able to offer such low-cost tenders and to complete projects ahead of schedule. The fact that Gama was facilitated by the Irish government with an arrangement where they did not have to pay income tax or social insurance, a de facto government grant worth millions, was not an issue. The fact that Gama was granted a huge number of work permits, despite a ban on issuing such permits since 2003, was not an issue. The fact that rumours had emerged that Gama was overworking and underpaying its workers was not an issue, despite inquiries by the trade union SIPTU, who had signed up Gama's Turkish workers following an agreement with the company. In a letter to Minister Seamus Brennan in May 2003, Taoiseach Mary Harney said, "Earlier allegations against Gama, made by competitors, regarding exploitative treatment of Turkish employees have been found to be without substance, as have allegations regarding pay levels in breach of legal norms. Generally, Gama was given a clean bill of health." This is the story of those who were concerned and did take issue.
At the end of October 2004, I was contacted to give support to 3 BATU trade union members who had started a strike on a building site in Lucan in Dublin. The builder was Gama. Talked to the lads about their own situation, but also got talking about the situation of the more than 100 Turkish nationals who are the main workers on that site and actually living on the site. And I just inquired about their situation, and the lads said, well, amongst other things, they didn't think the guys were necessarily getting their agreed rates of pay. That in the couple of weeks that they were working there, some of the Turkish lads had tried to communicate with them, and amongst other things wrote in the dirt the number 600, which the 3 lads took to mean 600 euros a month. I thought at the very least this was worth some investigation, and I contacted the council and raised it with them. They said, oh, Gama Construction are a reputable company and they're paying the rates and they're signed up to it's in the contract and so forth, and there's nothing to be worried about. I wrote to Gama themselves and got a letter off them back saying that yes, they were paying the registered employment agreement rate. Minimum on that scale is £12.96 an hour, and that there was everything was above board, and that they had been audited by this, that and the other, and there was no problem. I contacted some trade union officials both in Dublin and outside of Dublin that had some dealings with Gama, and they couldn't confirm for me what the rates of pay were. I went back to the party on this because I had drawn a blank with all the official channels, and I obviously had to decide whether there was going to be a lot more time and effort to put into this. and it was agreed that we should carry on, as there was a lot of suspicion around about this company. And in particular, I wrote a leaflet in English and got it translated into Turkish. The main thing on this leaflet was basically saying the guys were welcome here, there was no problem with them being in the country. But I, in particular, explained to them that Gama said that they were getting a minimum of $12.96 an hour, and then giving a small table on the leaflet which showed what that broke out to in money terms, and that we were talking more like €6,000 a month, rather than 600 is what they should be on. And we thought that that should be enough to maybe get them to contact us. After a few attempts, we got the leaflets into the site on the 26th of January by basically throwing them in over the hoarding and calling the guys down to collect them. That evening they tried to make contact with us, and we had a phone number from that. Backy rang them back, and after hours of discussion he finally got them to explain that in fact they were getting €2.20 an hour, which is 1/5 of the rate that everybody Gama said they were getting paid. And of course immediately you knew we had a major migrant worker scandal on our hands here.
I want to raise in particular with you one major scandal of immigrant worker exploitation of massive proportions. There is a major foreign-based multinational construction company employing about 10,000 people, 2,000 or so in this state, has secured massive local authority and state contracts here. This company imports workers who do not speak English from their home base, control their passports and work permits, accommodates them often in company barracks, demands an extent of hours worked that can only be called grotesque, and incredibly pays unskilled construction workers between €2 and €3 an hour basic, and skilled somewhat over €3 an hour. In short, a modern version of bonded labour. The instigator is a Turkish-based Gama Construction Ireland Limited.
Well, Count Collier, the first point to make is that every worker is entitled to the full protection of the laws, regardless. So the Deputy has mentioned the company, so obviously the Minister's here, and the Minister will raise it with his people to examine this matter.
Gama's abuse was raised in the Dáil to register the seriousness of the situation, with the aim of forcing the state to hold a formal investigation. Bertie Ahern agreed to an investigation, but many in politics, the unions and the media seriously doubted the truth of the allegations. Some clearly believed that Joe Higgins abused parliamentary procedures in attacking a company that was playing such a positive role.
The rights of immigrant workers are paramount, as are the rights of Irish workers who are undermined by this.
And it's not appropriate to talk about a company in the House, to name a company who are not here to defend themselves.
It's entirely appropriate, Count Corley, because they take advantage of their power over vulnerable workers to exploit. I will not allow that to happen.
There was a lot at stake. The journal Industrial Relations News stated, "If the central and most shocking allegation of pay rates as low as €2 to €3 per hour is found to be false, then it could cause serious damage to the credibility of the Socialist Party and Higgins himself. If the allegations are true, then the scandal is of huge proportions, given the amount of public contracts awarded to Gama in recent years." Gama welcomed the investigation.
The Socialist Party yesterday called for an investigation after one of its county councillors made contact with the Turkish workers.
Very, very nervous. In fact, prior to us even coming out with a translated leaflet, we actually tried to talk to some of these fellas when they were out and about, and they literally ran away from us. They wouldn't talk to us at all.
When they finally agreed to meet, these men didn't want to appear on camera, but through a translator told us they were paid on average €2.20 an hour.
€2.20.
They knew nothing of their union membership, and they were afraid to complain for fear of being sent home.
These allegations are absolutely untrue. The company is paying all our workers in accordance with the Registered Employment Agreement. Our pay procedure is very transparent. Our pay procedure has been advised to the unions, it has been agreed with the unions, and it has been notified to the unions.
They say that these are the only official documents they get from the company. and that a man comes from Turkey at the end of every month, and as they queue up to go in to collect their wages, they are given these pieces of paper which will tell them the amount of money that they've earned, their cash payment, what's been paid back in Turkey for their social insurance and into their Turkish bank account, and their net pay which goes into their hard currency account. And these are the hours that they've worked, these are the overtime hours that they've worked, and these are the Sunday hours that they've worked, because they're paid double on a Sunday, which they tell us is $4.40, which is double the $2.20 rate. They assure us that they don't receive any other pay slips apart from these.
Thank you. They are not pay slips that are handed out by the company. I can absolutely assure you that we would never, ever produce pay slips like that.
Gama'da çalışma saatleri çok uzundu gerçekten. Sabah 8'de başlıyorduk, akşam 11-12'ye kadar çalışıyorduk. Bazen 2'ye kadar çalışıyorduk, geceleri 2'ye kadar çalışıyorduk. Yalnız bu çalışma süre içerisinde akşamları mesela kumuni vermeleri gerekirken onu da bize vermiyorlardı.
Gama moved to undermine the investigation. Behind the high walls of the sites and hostels, intimidation intensified as Gama attempted to gag the workers, the living evidence of the abuse. Employing expensive legal expertise, they challenged in the High Court publication of the Labour Inspector's report. They spun a story that Joe Higgins, with some ex-Gama workers, were operating out of petty spite and were twisting the significance of some minor, genuine mistakes.
As part of the process, we found that there was an underpayment. That has been confirmed by the company. The company has put in place an internal investigation. A number of individuals have been suspended as part of the investigation.
The company says up to 800 workers will now receive back payments of between €50,000 and €3,500 each, plus interest.
This is a cynical damage limitation exercised by Gama. They are making certain admissions of minor underpayments to staff, relatively speaking. I believe that evidence on all this abuse of workers will come out, will stand up, and therefore Gama is attempting to limit the damage.
Publication of the report was delayed, but the truth of the abuse was now even being accepted in official society. However, over a month after the initial exposé, there was little real progress. The handful of Gama workers who had stepped forward remained isolated, as the company threatened to send home any workers who didn't back up their story. However, some new information that emerged was to prove vital.
Taoiseach, have you been briefed on the report by the Labour Inspectorate into the international Turkish-based construction company called Gama? Taoiseach, you went to Turkey and you invited Turkish big business to come to Ireland. Were you aware then or since that Gama, which came at your invitation, combines the most advanced technology with the most primitive techniques of worker exploitation, perfected in many states in the Middle East and then imported intact into Ireland 4.5 years ago? Gama swore to the Department of Enterprise and Employment, which you were in charge of, and to the trade unions that it paid the agreed rates to all its Turkish workers, a minimum of €12.96 per hour, and overtime, etc. But with consummate cynicism, Gama paid Irish workers those rates, but not the Turkish workers. Gama never gave its Turkish workers legal pay slips. These are Gama's pay slips. One typical for a worker called Jamal shows in 1 month last summer he worked 330 hours, a monstrous 80 hours plus per week. Leaving aside overtime, just on the flat rate, he should get a minimum of €4,200 a month. He got less than €1,000 a month. Where did the €3,000 go for that worker for that month?
Former Gama employees, accompanied by members of the Socialist Party, travelled to Amsterdam today in search of bank accounts they say contain their unpaid wages. Gama had previously indicated that some wages were lodged in foreign bank accounts, but these men say they left the company recently without ever knowing about the money.
I had no idea at all, just when I arrived to Amsterdam.
We're very happy with our trip here today. We've just uncovered
more of the money that is owed to the Turkish workers, the thousands of them that have worked in Ireland over the past 4 years. We have established that there are actually thousands of untouched bank accounts sitting in this bank here, and how the bank didn't think there was something strange about that is obviously hard to believe, you know.
When the investigation began, the Turkish workers were coached under severe duress to say it went to accounts in their names in Finance Bank in Holland. They had to be coached because no worker knows or knew that they have accounts in their name in Finance Bank in Holland. So what in fact we have is a master fraud by a major entity in the construction scene in this country, a grand larceny of workers' wages amounting to millions of euro each month.
For these workers at least, the bank says they will be able to access the money held on deposit in their name. Their former employer claims this was always the case.
There were nearly 2,000 accounts in the names of Gama workers in Finance Bank, Holland, which in total contained close to 40 million euros that the workers knew nothing about. If a trade union or a reporter began to ask questions about why the workers were only getting 2 to 3 euros an hour, far less than the registered employment agreement of just under 13 euros an hour, Gama could point to the money in Finance Bank, which was the balance between the amount the workers were actually getting and the amount they should have been getting. A few workers had been coached to say that they knew about the existence of these accounts and would be put forward by Gama to answer any probing questions. However, the vast majority of Turkish workers knew nothing of these accounts.
Benim Gama'da ne kadar alacağımı ben hiçbir şekilde bilmiyordum. Ben buraya geldiğim zaman kaç saat ücretimi bile bilmiyordum. Ankara'daki şubesine gittiğimiz zaman bize bir sürü kağıtlara imza attırdılar ve bu kağıtları sadece imzalanacak kısımlarını bize gösteriyorlar. Sorduğumuz zaman bunları neye imza atıyoruz dediğimiz zaman önemli bir şey değil ve İngilizceleri vardı ve anlamıyoruz. İngilizce bilmediğimiz için hiçbir şeyden anlamıyorduk.
In fact, one of these forms that the workers were signing authorised the establishment of their account in Finance Bank. Another form authorised the transfer of all monies out of the account. On cue, the day after money was put into these workers' accounts, it was systematically transferred to another account called Rider Investments. Finance Bank and Gama refused to give any information regarding who the beneficiaries of Rider Investments were. But what's clear is that the money was never intended for Gama workers. A person who had been working for Gama for 3 years in Ireland had more than 40,000 euros in their name in an account in Holland that they did not even know existed.
And Gama paid not a penny in income tax on behalf of the workers, not one penny, because they are exempt by agreement with you and the revenue commissioners from paying income tax, which gives them a hugely competitive edge, apart from the slave rates, with other construction companies which pay the trade union rates. Tánaiste. This is the most severe corporate criminality, the most severe exploitation of workers, and a threat to the wages and conditions of all workers, Irish and immigrant. I want this report published, and I want action immediately on it.
Ceann Corley, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment has initiated an inquiry which the Labour Inspectorate is currently carrying out, and I understand it will be available to him shortly. And if the information the Deputy Higgins has mentioned, and I have no reason to doubt that it's not correct, if that information stands up when the Labour Inspectorate produces a report, it is a disgrace.
The 4 ex-employees gaining access to their funds and the fact that there were accounts for the other workers had a huge impact on Irish people. But it transformed the mood of the Gama workers themselves.
Gerçekten böyle bir haber bize geldikten sonra çok sevinmiştik. Yani gerçekten bizim paramızda olduğuna inanmıştık. Tam olarak yani biz de bilmiyorduk. Yani yalnız Joe Higgins ise bu konuda bize tam olarak paranızın olduğunu söyledi. Bu para kesinlikle sizin paranızdır ya da sizin hakkınızdır dedi. Muhakkak bunu Öğreneceğiz ve son zamanda da Joe Gis bu konuyu araştırdı ve gerçekten öğrenmişti. Bu konuda çok sevindik bizim paramız oradan göre.
Yani ilk başta bizim buradaki çalıştığımız paraların biz Türkiye'ye gönderildiğini sanıyorduk. Hollanda'da olduğunu öğrendiğimiz zaman herkes büyük bir şaşkınlık içerisinde ve Gama'nın nasıl bir oyun düzenlediğinin yani inanamadık. Büyük bir şaşkınlık içerisine girdik.
However, Gama owed the workers even more money than the amounts in Finance Bank. The funds in those accounts only brought the total up to what a worker was owed for a 48-hour working week. The reality was that most of the workers worked an average of over 80 hours a week, another reason why the major projects were completed ahead of schedule. The money owed for this overtime was not accounted for by the money in Finance Bank. A meeting with a small group of Gama workers had already been arranged for Sunday the 3rd of April 2005. But because of the dramatic developments in Holland, word of the meeting spread quickly. 220 Gama workers turned up. Most came from Balgady and Ballymun in Dublin, but there were also groups from the sites at Ennis in County Clare and Tina in County Galway. The mood was electric and determined. The grip of fear on these workers had been broken. This was the first mass gathering of Gama workers, and it was used to organise and plan how to get all the money they were owed and the working conditions they were entitled to. Most were surprised to find out that they were members of SIPTU. They established the Turkish Workers' Action Group and elected a strike committee to maintain full control over their struggle. When the proposal came for immediate strike action, the response was a determined, bold and unanimous yes, and SIPTU officials were quickly told of the workers' decision. On Monday the 4th of April 2005, 350 migrant workers from Turkey went on strike and took to the streets of Dublin chanting slogans in their own language. The objective of the action was to try to close down Gama's 4 main sites in Ireland, 2 in Dublin and 2 in the west of Ireland. In Tina, County Galway, a power station in which Gama also owned a share was being built. There were around 500 Turkish workers there, the largest concentration anywhere in the country, and organising industrial action in the Tina site was a key priority. If this site could be shut down, it would put enormous financial pressure on Gama to concede.
And they've just decided now that they are going to go to Tina for the protest as was organised yesterday.
Hello James, Joe Higgins here. Good. All right, listen, everything is in order. The guys are all loaded up in big buses here and we'll be leaving shortly. So I reckon in Tina by probably 3 o'clock or so, you know.
Basically, they're afraid that
guarantees.
Yeah, there were sort of guarantees that, you know,
when they come out, there'll be no action. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And you want us to be management and ask for those requests? That's the president.
No, they want to talk to their colleagues.
Yes,
That's
of course.
the key.
They won't give
we
us
have
access.
asked that management allow us to have access to the men, to bring the men forward out here to participate in the meeting and protest out here with their colleagues from Dublin. But the management have refused us that request.
Birinci kısım içeridekilerin dışarıma gelmesini istiyordunuz ya.
They want to visit their friends. They have friends they haven't seen for months. Management will not give them access. Furthermore, not only will management not give them access to their friends inside on site, but they will not allow us to invite their friends and their worker colleagues out here to participate and to meet their colleagues and
So
their
you can do
fellow
nothing about
nationals here today.
There are a lot of of intimidation going on inside. Is that what you've been hearing?
The word from the lads who are in touch with their colleagues in there is there is huge intimidation. They have thrown men out this morning, told them they may not get back in if they join the protest. They pushed 7 workers out of here the night before last, kept them out in the rain, and the Garda had to be called for them, and then refused to let them back to work the following morning. Workers came down here for us to talk and discuss the situation. Now it's quite clear that Gama has too much to hide, which is also why they have taken out an injunction to stop the inspector's report being published. And the reason that they're trying to stop a meeting between the workers in there and their colleagues out here is the colleagues out here know more of the truth, because their friends went to Amsterdam to claim their money and found indeed that it was there. So they're terrified of the impact.
Hakkımız engellenemez! Görüşme hakkımız engellenemez! Görüşme hakkımız engellenemez! Görüşme hakkımız engellenemez!
Unfortunately, the protest didn't cause serious industrial action to develop in Tina. There was a high level of physical threats and intimidation inside the site. Some of those who went on strike from Tina left to join the strikers in Dublin. The 3 sites in Dublin and Ennis contained around 150 workers each. All significant work in Dublin had stopped, and 40 went on strike in Ennis. Soon after, those strikers, who were carpenters, joined the building and allied trade union, BATU. The strike committee was also extended to include 2 Irish construction workers, activists in SIPTU and BATU. The impact of the industrial action was enormous. The protests put real faces on what had been only allegations up till then. Gama's relationship with the state, which funded a huge amount of their work, was a crucial factor. They charged Irish prices but paid Turkish wages and devoured the huge margins in between. They hadn't just robbed the Turkish workers, they had also robbed the Irish workers as taxpayers. The disgust at Gama was widespread, but a way had to be found to turn that support into real pressure on the government who, with its control of the purse strings, could force Gama to pay the cash from Finance Bank and the money that the workers were owed for overtime, and to implement the proper conditions.
Susma, sustukça sıra sana gelecek. Susma, sustukça sıra sana gelecek. Haklıyız, söke söke alırız. İşçiyiz, haklıyız, söke söke alırız. İşçiyiz, haklıyız, söke söke alırız. İşçiyiz, haklıyız, söke söke alırız. İşçiyiz, haklıyız, söke söke alırız. Çok aşırı bir şekilde sesimizi duymalıyız arkadaşlar. Vur, vur, dinlesin, Gama bizi dinlesin. Vur, vur, dinlesin, Gama bizi dinlesin.
Grev işçilerin, emekçilerin hakları çalındığı zaman ve bu haklarını geri almak için işçilerin, emekçilerin giriştikleri eylem ve organize olaydır. Bu olayda da işçilerin hakları çalınmıştı ve biz grev kararı almıştık. Ve yaklaşık olarak sayımız 300 kişiydi. Ve büyük bir çoğunluktu bu. Arkadaşlarım arasında gerçekten büyük bir dayanışma vardı. Büyük bir kenetlenme oluştu. Ve bu Bizde büyük bir mutluluk oluşturdu bu. Yani bu bir hak alma mücadelesi olduğu için bu beni mutlu ediyordu. Ve sonraki zamanlarda işçilerin hakları çalındığı zaman aynı şekilde mücadele etme isteğini bende oluşturdu.
Now the program for today, we have to be very short here. The program for today is very important. For the next hour and a half, we have 7,000 leaflets looking for support for your struggle and asking workers to come to the Parliament to join your protest at 1 o'clock.
But I want to ask you, Taoiseach, how could such a vile machine of shocking exploitation be transferred intact from the Middle East by Gama to Irish sites, and how could they get away with it for 4.5 years? It is inconceivable to me that prestigious projects, including 2 ESB power stations, could be constructed without some senior personnel noticing. For once thing, the workers never got a single legal wage slip. And if there was an excuse about wages, surely the slave regime of 80 hours per week with no stop ever for rain and cold could not have been invisible. And that's not even to raise the depraved morality of Irish professionals who continuously at a big price whited the sepulchre called Gama, whited the rottenness that is inside that company. Now this state is deeply shamed that men who came here to support their families, fathers who left their spouses and young children, brothers and sons, should be most criminally abused, exploited and duped in the course of the construction of the Celtic Tiger infrastructure. And Taoiseach, when you get up to answer me, I invite you to look at a delegation of the Turkish workers in the eye in the public gallery and tell them that the Irish people do not condone and are ashamed of the abuse that they have suffered. In Finance Bank Holland, last year alone, €9 million was put in there, secretly and duplicitously, of workers' wages. There is probably €30 million in workers' funds in Finance Bank Holland. When we surprised them by bringing 4 ex-workers there, they did supply us within 20 minutes a full account of the workers and each money that went into their account and what happened to it, a full statement which of course they hadn't furnished to a single worker in the course of 3 years, therefore the worker not knowing that it was there. I want to ask you, Taoiseach, will you tell us now today and guarantee through the intervention of the Irish state that by this weekend we will have in our hands this full statement for each worker in Gama in their hands on the sites, so that next week we can then sign the documents to access their accounts and have the money sent to their families or as they dispose.
It is our intention, and you asked me to make the remark to the Gama workers that are here, it is our intention to make sure that we receive and seek their full rights and that we get the full obligations that Gama owe to them, that we get that money and we secure it.
This company must be banged around the place by the government to ensure that immediately it complies with trade union rates of pay, trade union conditions, human and worker rights, and the end to this regime of exploitation and intimidation which has made it a fortune but at enormous human expense to its workers. And what the Prime Minister said in response to the pressure we were putting is that the money belongs to the workers and that the Irish government is now looking for access to those funds for the workers.
The Batu and the SIP2 lads would know that this government does not act on behalf of working class people. So the fact that they've taken this position is because of the action that the Turkish workers have taken.
5 yıllık bir iş Gama ben 2,5 yılda bitiriyorum diyorsa hükümet bunu araştırmıyordu. Nasıl bitiriyorsun ve bu kadar ucuza nasıl mal ediyorsun? Bunun araştırmasını yapmıyordu. Hükümetin işine sadece ne kadar ucuza mal ederse ve ne kadar çabuk sürede bitirirse hükümetin işine o geliyordu. Onun için hükümet de bu işin içindeydi. Sendikada olaya hep tepkisiz kaldı.
Over 400 Turkish workers were employed by Gama Construction when they were the main subcontractors for the building of the ESB's 2 new power stations in the Midlands. On the day the sod was turned for the new 150 megawatt unit in Shannonbridge, County Offaly, 2.5 years ago, RTE News asked the Finance Minister Brian Cowan to respond to allegations that the Gama employees were not being paid the minimum wage.
Yeah, that's just not true.
This afternoon, 40 Gama employees protested in Lanesborough, County Longford, as Mr Cowan arrived to open the other Midlands plant at Lockery Power. So was he wrong or misled when he denied the wage claims in 2002?
I wasn't misled and you weren't misled, and I didn't mislead you. I'm simply stating to you that the contracts that were put in place were on the basis of all of those laws being adhered to. If it subsequently emerges, as it seems to now emerge, that for some of those workers that wasn't the case, that has to be rectified.
But are you not embarrassed 2 years on that in the situation now that we know, for the chairman said it today, these people haven't been paid? 2 years ago you told us there was no truth in that allegation.
I'm not embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed looking at that plant or looking at what was coming forward in Shannonbridge. I think Gama might have to be embarrassed, or whoever was involved in the shenanigans that were going on.
There's no question of ESB in any way turning a blind eye to anything, and particularly in relation to sort of workers' rights and employment rights.
The industrial action, focused protests, and the use of Joe Higgins' Dáil position created intense pressure on the government. On Tuesday the 19th of April, it began to pay off as the first money from Finance Bank was transferred to the workers' accounts in Turkey. Gama was also forced to give pay slips, pay the proper rate, and reduce the working week for those still working in Ennis and Tina. However, not long after, Gama was successful in the High Court in delaying the publication of the inspector's report.
The company claimed the minister had no power to order such an investigation and wants the High Court to quash the inspector's report. In the meantime, it has secured an injunction preventing publication. However, Mr Justice Peter Kelly has ruled that the report can be passed on to other agencies with powers of prosecution, including the Fraud Squad, the Revenue Commissioners, the Director of Corporate Enforcement, the Immigration Bureau and the Competition Authority.
The day after this favourable ruling for Gama, they went on an offensive. Determined the strikers would get nothing more, they tried to crush the struggle. Some strikers' families in Turkey were intimidated.
Grev sırasında Gama şefleri tarafından sürekli bir baskı oluşturuyorlardı üzerimizde. Örnek olarak bizim güya terörist gruplarla ilişkide olduğumuzu ve ailelerimizi arayarak işte oğlunuz, babanız, kardeşiniz İrlanda'da terörist gruplarla ilişki halindedir. Lütfen oğlunuzu, babanızı, kardeşinizi çağırın, bu grevi bitirsin. Yoksa aksi takdirde Türkiye'ye geldiği zaman başı belaya girecektir gibi tehditler yapıyorlardı. Artı arkadaşlarımızı gizli gizli arayarak onlara gizlice para teklifinde bulunuyorlardı. Bu gibi baskılar vardı üzerimizde.
Isn't it incredible, Taoiseach, that the only experience of Irish laws that these migrant workers have experienced is the flouting of it by the company that brought them here on the invitation of the Taoiseach, and that further this company can hire the most expensive lawyers in Dublin with the unpaid wages of the workers to get High Court protection from preventing the truth of exploitation regime coming into the open by blocking the report of the Labour Inspectorate.
At one stage in the strike, Gama decided to put the food on the men. The men lived in the workplaces and Gama was responsible for getting their food in, and as a dirty trick they decided they'd stop allowing the food into the men.
We have no place, no house for the sleeping. We think what we will do, we don't know.
They say they're running out of food and that this is all that was left for meals for the men.
too much working. Saturday, Sunday, every week's working. Look now. Look now, look. This is lunch for everybody. Dinner.
Now, we decided there and then that we would get the food to the men, no matter how we were going to do that, we would do it. SIP2 had made some money available, so it was no problem for us to get the food to the men. We contacted the bread man for Belgadi, and he agreed to meet me every morning at 6:30 in a pub car park. I went every morning and met him, squeezed the 100 lobs into the back of my car and drove the bread to the men in Belgadi. Now, I was going to continue getting the food to the men through thick or thin.
This magnificent building here was built from the super profits that Gama made from the super exploitation of your labor. It really belongs to you.
Arkadaşlar diyor, bu gördüğünüz muhteşem bina sizlerin sayesinde yapılan çok büyük karlarla yapıldı ve bu bina aslında sizlere ait bir binadır.
Gama today has pulled its meanest trick to date by stopping the food to the workers in the Ballymun site. It believes it can starve you back to work or back home to Turkey. But let us hear today in Gama the message: you will not be starved back to work or back home to Turkey until all the outstanding issues are resolved. What you are going through now, Irish workers went through at an earlier time in our history, when bosses, Irish bosses like Gama, tried to starve the workers in Dublin back to work to accept slave wages and conditions. But the workers of Dublin gave them, those bosses then, the same answer as you are giving now. They stood and they fought as you are standing and fighting. Lastly, friends, to finish, let us stay united. Stay united, stay strong, and we will achieve the justice that is absolutely necessary for you. We will achieve the proper wages that you have worked for.
Bizim grevde başladığımızdan bu yana bitimine kadar İrlanda halkından çok büyük bir destek gördük desek doğru olur. Ve Ballymun'da şantiyelerde greve devam ettiğimiz sürece sabahları bizim hatta Gama'nın bize yemek vermediği günlerde duyan İrlandalı insanlar sabahın erken saatlerinde bize sandviç, çay, kendi evlerinde yaptıkları şeyleri getirip bize o şekilde destek verdiklerini görünce insan daha da bir duygulanıyor ve İrlandalıların da desteğini gördükten sonra bu grevin başarıyla sonuçlanacağını daha da bir içten inanıyor insan.
Later that week, Gama also tried to directly break the strike by forcing large numbers of non-union subcontractors onto the sites in Dublin.
The site is closed and they're blocking it for a reason. Because they understand.
That you're blocking it for a reason. Yeah. You know what I mean? I understand that there is an ongoing dispute going on there, okay? But the thing is, when you're protesting, you can't just block the site.
That's not true. It's not true. You know, there is a tradition in Ireland and elsewhere of effective struggle, and that means blocking workplaces, you know, when there's strike going on, and preventing what we call scabbing. I'm sure you understand the concept of scabbing. My name is Michael O'Brien.
Are you organising this?
I'm with the Socialist Party. We've been supporting these workers from day one.
Yeah, okay.
These vindictive attacks were repelled, but clearly by the fifth week the struggle was increasingly difficult. Many strikers expected the Irish government to use its power to resolve the issues quickly, but they didn't. The government moved slowly and only when under pressure generated from the workers' action. Fighting for the payment of unpaid overtime seemed less straightforward than getting the money from Finance Bank. The Finance Bank payment was a huge boost, but the struggle was clearly very tiring, and a trickle of workers began to return to Turkey. This dispute was about the abuse of migrant workers on an industrial scale. The crisis that was to emerge at Irish ferries soon after confirmed the danger of a race to the bottom, first indicated by the Gama dispute. Irish workers supported the struggle, but the trade unions involved didn't respond as they could. The trade union movement should have shut down Gama until all the issues were resolved. Unfortunately, serious attempts weren't made to stop supplies to these sites, and trade union members continued to work at Tina and Ennis during the dispute. The strikers distributed a new leaflet in Turkish into Ennis and Tina over the May Day weekend, but intimidation remained a key factor. However, many of the workers on these sites were sympathetic to the action. They benefited enormously from the struggle as they got money from Finance Bank and were being paid 4 to 5 times the previous rate. If a significant section of the Turkish workers at Tina joined the action, Gama would have been forced to make more concessions. Unfortunately, this didn't happen. As the 6th week dawned, it was difficult to see industrial action being extended. A small number of committee members secretly met management, broke with the strike and campaigned to get others to return home. Gama intervened into the sites, saying any striker that gave up would be given a letter guaranteeing that the company would not prosecute them when they returned to Turkey. The letter said, "Our company incurred heavy losses. In spite of this, because you voluntarily stopped this illegal protest and decided to go back to Turkey, you will not be sued for financial loss, and there will be no criminal complaint about you." These threats were completely bogus, but very intimidatory. All this was a further blow, and the idea of returning home loomed larger, and more began to leave. But some strikers responded to these difficulties. They made sure a new strike committee was elected, and a mass meeting was organised for Wednesday, the 11th of May. Although still on strike, just under 200 people attended the meeting.
SIP2 and the Turkish Workers' Action Group presented a dossier of evidence which they say reveals massive discrepancies between what Gama workers were actually paid and what they should have been paid for the overtime they worked.
The company, through a process of attrition, are reducing the numbers involved in the dispute day after day. And obviously the company feels that when the last of them have given up on the picket line, there won't be any case to resolve.
The Minister for Overseas Aid, Conor Lenihan's job is on the line tonight after he made an offensive remark about Turkish people. The Socialist TD Joe Higgins, who has campaigned on behalf of Turkish Gama workers, was addressing the Dáil about Aer Lingus when the Minister told him to stick to the kebabs.
Another day in the Dáil, another earful for the Taoiseach. Joe Higgins was in full flight taunting Fianna Fáil TDs about the future of Aer Lingus.
Has anybody like me been struck by the silence of the lambs on the Fianna Fáil backbenches? Now, in the past, when cuts in Aer Lingus or privatisation was mooted, we heard shrill cries. Perhaps strangled cries would be more accurate from the government backbenches.
Then the lambs bleated back, and it was while their shepherd was trying to reply above their baas that the offensive remarks were made. Off microphone but audible to all in the chamber, Conor Lenihan told Joe Higgins to stick with the kebabs. The independent TD knew immediately what he meant.
The snide comment from behind you that I should stick with the kebabs, referring to my fight against the exploitation of Gama workers, ill behoves the Minister for Overseas Development.
During the order of business this morning, I made remarks that I now regret having made. I regret the remarks made and apologise sincerely if any cause or offence was taken from the remarks made.
The accountancy firm PricewaterhouseCoopers has resigned as the auditor to Gama Construction Ireland. The accountants said Gama had failed to furnish them with information relating to alleged breaches of employment rights of Turkish workers.
In the context of strikers returning to Turkey, and with the industrial action weakening, a way had to be found to pressurise the state to make Gama pay up. The Socialist Party argue that even though labour relations mechanisms are biased in favour of the employers, such was the level of pressure created by the strike, it would be difficult for the Labour Court not to award the Gama strikers a significant settlement for overtime. In order to get to the Labour Court, the workers first of all had to involve the Labour Relations Commission. On the 23rd of May 2005, the two sides arrived for talks at the Labour Relations Commission. After 5 hours of tense negotiations, a set of proposals was brokered.
There's a proposal gone to the union, and we believe that should be properly considered by our employees, their members, and then we should see if a return to work is possible.
There's no trust amongst these workers whatsoever. We feel obliged to go back to a general meeting of all of the Turkish workers and the Irish workers tomorrow to tell them what happened here today, but we're not hopeful that that will bring about a return to work.
It took the 85 strikers around an hour to unanimously reject the proposals for a return to work hammered out at the Labour Relations Commission yesterday. SIPTU said the men had a complete and absolute distrust of Gama and called for an immediate Labour Court investigation.
To progress to a Labour Court judgment, the Labour Relations Commission must be unable to bring the two sides together. So the strikers did everything possible to highlight the irreconcilable nature of the dispute. The Labour Court then put forward a set of recommendations on the issue of unpaid overtime.
Roll call at Liberty Hall for what could be the last time as striking Gama workers voted to return to work under the terms of a Labour Court recommendation. The Labour Court has now recommended that each worker be paid up to €8,000 per year of service.
It's an industrial relations settlement rather than justice. The system in this country would not allow for justice for workers who can't afford to hang around and wait for 18 months or 2 years, and the government need to examine that.
Socialist Party TD Joe Higgins said the recommendation was a stunning vindication of the claims of worker exploitation and said the government should force Gama to make the payments within days. The Labour Court also said Gama should in future meet its legal obligations on payslips and rates of pay. The company had consistently denied owing large overtime payments. This evening, a spokesperson said they were seriously considering the recommendation and were seeking clarification on some of the issues.
The following day, on the 27th of May 2005, Gama accepted the Labour Court recommendation.
Bu parayı aldıktan sonra gerçekten bizim için bir diyebilirim ki bir piyangoydu o. Kendime bir ev aldım. Birçoğunun hayatında maddi açıdan gerçekten çok büyük bir katkısı oldu diyebilirim.
Finans bankadaki olan paramızı tam olarak aldık ama mesleği paralarımızın hiçbirisini, yani 3'ten birini bile alamadık en doğrusu. Bu bizim mesleği paramız ana paradan daha çok yüksekti. Ama bunu tabii ki tam olarak İrlanda hükümeti bize destek vermediği için Gama da buna sevindi yani. Gama'nın daha çok kârı oldu yani. Biz tam olarak haklarımızı alamadık yani bunu. Gama da biliyor, İrlanda haklı da biliyor. İrlanda hükümeti de bilir bunu yani.
Gama just proved what we'd been saying to the unions at our branch meetings for years. That there is a major problem out there and we better face it before we're destroyed. Before there is no unions left in the industry.
İşçinin kesinlikle ayrımcılığı olmaması gerekir. Çünkü işçi her zaman kardeştir. Yani emekçidir sonuçta. Emeğin karşılığını alması için emeğine saygı gösteren herhangi bir işçi kim olursa olsun gerçekten toplum bir mücadele vermesi iyi bir şeydir yani. Herkesin toplum bir mücadele vermesi iyi bir şeydir. Çünkü sonuçta işçi her zaman işçidir yani. Büyük bir destek, birbirine destek vermesi çok iyi bir şeydir yani.
The union is only as strong as the membership it has. And it's only as active as its activists. And I would encourage people, workers, members of trade unions, to become involved in their union. If they're not happy with how their union is run, become active. To become active at branch level, become members of a branch committee, and change the structure of their union. And demand that the union act for their good.
Nothing can substitute for the trade union movement, organising militant campaigns in all areas of employment where it is necessary to root out the scourge of exploitation, of low pay, of long working hours, of abuse of both migrant and Irish low-paid workers in Ireland, in Europe, and even throughout the world. It is inevitable in the era of neoliberal capitalism that we will have deeper and stronger attacks by the employers, major companies, multinationals, on the wages and working conditions of workers in the pursuit of even greater profits than are being earned at the present time. That flags for us the necessity for a major response to that in terms of workers in Ireland and internationally getting organised, standing shoulder to shoulder across ethnic groups, across national divisions, across continents even, in order to bring the strength of the working class, which is the strongest force on earth if it realised its power together, to end that neoliberal drive.